Hello, welcome to another Purple Insider Extra. Matthew Coller here, along with Sam Ekstrom. A reminder to listen to our longer conversations wherever you get your podcast. Just type in Purple Insider or click the link below and read our written work, purpleinsider.substack.com. Sam, the Vikings brought back Dakota Dozier, who started for them at left guard last year, and the internet was ablaze with the Vikings' decision to bring Dozier back. What does it mean to you?
Well, we were live at Birdie Golf doing the podcast when this happened, our good partners at Birdie, and they got quite a show because I think we were stunned along with the rest of Vikings Twitter. It's a very surprising move, even though there's no guaranteed money. It's the veteran minimum. I just can't believe that they could see last year and want that back, even if it's just as a depth piece. I suppose in a depth role where he's not expected to start 16 games. And if he was good at anything, it was durability last year. He played every game and he played poorly. And it was not pretty. It was the sixth worst PFF graded season in their history of grading games. That goes back 15 years. Just to put things in perspective, he was top 5 worst in penalties, run blocking, pass blocking. There wasn't a lot of redeeming quality about his play last year. So again, the Vikings valuing continuity on offense. I mean, they've done this for a few years in a row where they bring back a lot of the same fringe free agents, bringing back Amir Abdullah multiple years, Sean Mannion multiple years, re-signing Chad Beebe, re-signing Brett Jones and Dakota Dozier, just filling out their bench with familiar faces. Dozier is familiar. And I guess they like his ability, before the snap and his preparation, his conscientiousness, as Mike Zimmer has said. Maybe there's some good intangibles there, but the play on the field has not been great. So at max, this needs to be a depth role where he could maybe play center in a pinch, maybe play guard, maybe even tackle. He should not be a starter.
So the thing about his contract is that it matches up with what we thought of his play last year, that you get the veteran minimum by being a guy who is a replacement level or below replacement level player, which is what Dakota Dozier was. And if you look at his history, 2019, and then, before that, he had never played more than like 200 or 300 snaps. And then all of a sudden he's asked to play 16 games after beating Aviant Collins for the left guard spot in the most exciting training camp race we've ever covered.
Riveting.
It certainly was a day-to-day trying to figure out who was going to play left guard. But I think that the fact that they didn't pay him almost anything, and when he was in that depth role, he was able to come in every so often and handle a couple of games. I remember Rick Spielman talking about this a few years ago in one of our meetings with him, how they categorize players as here's superstars, here's guys that are going to be 16-game starters, here's guys that are more, if you have to play them 5 or 6 games, that's okay, but if it's any more than that, it's probably going to get you in trouble. And I think Dakota Dozier is that guy. And if last year he had played a handful of games and not been very good, but they brought him back, I think we would have said, okay, that's fine. It costs you no money. And he's a guy who knows the system. It's the fact that he was pressed into that role that can't happen again. If he is just a backup, he can play center, he could play tackle in a pinch, he could play guard. He'll learn all those positions. And you like that he's going to bring that to the table. And clearly his personality matters, as a lot of their backups have, which I think is one of the reasons Zimmer keeps bringing them back. It's just, it's almost like when fans hear the name after watching him get beat last year so many times inside, they just go, no, not this again. And if he is battling for a starting spot in training camp, then this move does need to be criticized, but there's still a lot of offseason to go. So I would say take a deep breath.
They didn't set up a very daunting training camp battle for him last year. Aviant Collins was not the fiercest of competition. And if they set up another straw man, maybe it's Kyle Hinton or Mason Cole, then we've got a problem on our hands. And I can understand why fans are upset, because the Vikings are sort of working backwards here. They have not fulfilled the most pressing needs, which are starting level offensive linemen, and they might have 2 starting spots. Right now, they've brought in, they've re-signed Rashad Hill, who has been a backup most of his career, all of his career, really. Mason Cole, who was a subpar center guard for the Cardinals, and now Dakota Dozier, a very subpar guard. So because they haven't brought in real concrete solutions, I get why fans are upset because this feels just like the icing on the cake. Oh, another bad guard, classic Vikings. Mike Zimmer, though, during his press conference on Wednesday, seemed to indicate that there's the draft to go. And the draft is going to indicate maybe where Ezra Cleveland plays, who plays left tackle. It made me feel more confident than I have before that they're going to take an offensive lineman very highly in this draft, maybe even in the first round.
I think that that's very possible. And the one thing I would caution with that is sometimes offensive linemen in the draft take a while to develop. Garrett Bradbury, I think, is still a developing player, that his first 2 years have not been that inspiring. And yet I don't want to say for sure that it hasn't worked out, because we've seen way too many offensive linemen around the league in year 3, in year 4. That's when they first start to take those big steps. Last year, the top drafted offensive lineman, Andrew Thomas, had one of the worst pass blocking years in the NFL. The second half of the season, he started to come along, and I don't think the Giants feel terribly about that draft pick just because that's the trajectory. But if you are drafting Rashawn Slater, you're asking or Elijah Vera Tucker, someone like that, to come in right away and solve all of your offensive line problems, then you might very well end up with Dakota Dozier starting again at left guard, or Mason Cole starting at guard, because it's just hard for these guys to do that. It was difficult for Ezra Cleveland. It was difficult for Brian O'Neill. Sometimes we act like Brian O'Neill just came in and snapped his fingers and was all set, but I think he'll tell you there were plenty of welcome to the NFL moments for him. There were just other problems on that offensive line that got more attention. So I do think that, the Pat Elflein, who came in 2017 and was a difference maker right away before he had those injuries, that's more of something you can't count on, yet it feels like that's what they will, because when you look at the remaining free agent list, you've got the Chiefs tackles, Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz, who are still out there, but both had injuries, and then a handful of other guys. But there are not many players that I would say, wow, if you bring him in, that's a very big upgrade over Dakota Dozier.
Yeah, it's tough to imagine that the plan for the Vikings was to fill their starting spot this late in free agency. I mean, I think if they really were adamant about finding a free agent starter, they would have done it by now. I mean, that has to be a signal that the draft is where they intend to really find that starter, because there are tackles available right now. Not necessarily guards, but I think the Vikings need both. So the fact that they've spent their money on defense, they haven't really made an attempt, it appears, to find some starting caliber lineman in free agency. I don't think they're going to. I think they wanted to fill out their depth in free agency and find a blue chipper in the draft. I think it's between edge rusher and offensive line, and today it feels like offensive line.
Yep, that is how it feels today, and yet there still has not been much done to improve the pass rush, so still more moves to come, still more emergency podcasts. Wherever you get your podcasts, make sure you go check out Purple Insider and purpleinsider.substack.com. We'll catch you on the next Purple Extra.